Biblical motives in Goethe's Faust. Introduction. The story of Faust, while inspiring a lot of modern forms of art and expression, also is known to have inspired a great deal of literature, music, and illustration, as well as countless interpretations such as Jungian, Freudian, sociological, alchemical, literary, and classical. Today, many of the classical and Central European themes may be hard for modern readers to grasp, but the work is still considered important not only in the field of science and scientific understanding but also in poetic terms, as Goethe offers an involved, holistic approach to these areas of study unrelated to our modern view of science as a wholly analytic field, but in tune, however, with some modern thinking. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust is his most famous work and is considered by many to be one of the greatest plays of German literature as a tragic play, and is considered by many the best-known version of the Faust story. It was published in two parts, Faust, a tragedy Part 1 and Faust, the second part of the tragedy. However, it was deemed that the play is a closet drama meant to be read rather than performed. Faust, Part 1 focuses on the soul of Faust, which has been sold to the devil, and Faust, Part 2, on social phenomena such as psychology, history, and politics. Discussion. Faust, Part 1 takes place in multiple settings, the first of which is heaven. Mephistopheles makes a bet with God. He says that he can deflect God's favorite human being, Faust. This part is comparable to the temptation of Christ in the desert after he has taken 40-day fasting. However, in the play, Faust is striving to learn everything that can be known through questionable pursuits. Another scene takes place in Faust's study, where Faust, despairing at the vanity of scientific, humanitarian, and religious learning, turns to magic for the showering of infinite knowledge, suspecting that his attempts are failing. He even attempted suicide but seems to have been enlightened after he hears the echo of nearby Easter celebrations. Faust goes for a walk with his assistant Wagner and is followed home by a stray poodle that transforms into the devil, where they arranged, the devil will do everything that Faust wants while he is here on earth, and Faust will serve the devil in hell. During the time Mephisto the devil is serving Faust, Faust is so pleased with everything the devil gives him, that he wants that moment to last forever. Mephisto urges Faust to sign the contract with his blood, and Faust is obliged to sign it with a drop of his blood. Faust then meets Margaret or Gretchen and lures her with jewelry, while the devil draws Gretchen into Faust's arms. They sleep together, and to spend privacy with Faust, Gretchen poisons her mother. When Gretchen discovers she is pregnant, her brother Valentine condemns Faust. They had a duel and Valentine fell dead at the hands of Faust and the devil. Then, Gretchen drowns her illegitimate child and is convicted of murder. Faust tried to save Gretchen from death by attempting to free her from prison but failed, and they heard voices from heaven that announced that Gretchen shall be saved. In this instance, the Bible speaks of the ills that come to man after Adam and Eve committed the sin of disobedience. Prior to sin, the couple had lived in natural splendor, although they started doubting the time Satan came and introduced them to the idea of being equal with God. From Cain to Job, and even the kings of Jerusalem, there had been the struggle to win over men and lands, properties, and enemies, as well as the search for spiritual content among the Bible characters. Likewise, men have struggled to be equal with God in the construction of the Tower of Babel, learning as much as they can. David himself had to murder Bathsheba's husband. Although David was condemned, he asked for God's forgiveness, and Bathsheba became his favorite wife. So much like Gretchen and Faust, David committed sin prior to having relations with Bathsheba. Faust, Part 2 is composed of classical allusion, where the romantic story of the first Faust is forgotten. Faust wakes in a field of fairies to initiate a new cycle of adventures and purpose. The piece consists of 5 acts, which are relatively isolated episodes, and each representing a different theme. In the end, Faust wins the bet and goes to heaven. Schopenhauer praised Goethe's portrayal of Gretchen and her suffering. In Schopenhauer's discussion of salvation from the suffering of the world, he cited this section of Faust as exemplifying one of the ways to sanctity. The great Goethe has given us a distinct and visible description of this denial of the will, brought about by great misfortune and by the despair of all deliverance, in his immortal masterpiece Faust, in the story of the sufferings of Gretchen. I know of no other description in poetry. It is a perfect specimen of the second path, which leads to the denial of the will not, like the first, through the mere knowledge of the suffering of the whole world which one acquires voluntarily, but through the excessive pain felt in one's person. Many tragedies indeed bring their violently willing heroes ultimately to this point of complete resignation, and then the will to live and its phenomenon usually end at the same time. But no description known to me brings to us the essential point of that conversion so distinctly and so free from everything extraneous as the one mentioned in Faust. Gretchen is like in many instances, the sinners in the Bible that have turned to Jesus later on. These include prostitutes, Mary Magdalene, and Zacchaeus the tax collector, among others. Conclusion. It is acknowledged that Goethe has been inspired as well as inspired great bodies of arts and literature, so that passages and parallels to Bible stories and accounts could not be avoided. The play is in itself full of struggles between a choice of good and evil and actual actions that depict evil among humans. The unquenchable longing, however, for a filled spirit, remained the theme of the play all throughout, making it similar to biblical human accounts.